The arena smelled like burning citrus and wet copper, a nauseating mix wafting from 100,000 alien throats chanting in frequencies that made the steel walls vibrate like tuning forks. Somewhere in the rafters, a flock of winged mollusks screeched, their translucent membranes fluttering in agitated pulses as they tasted the emotions boiling below. This was the grand coliseum of Elter Prime, the Galactic Empire's jewel of bloodsport, a place where the weak were exhibited and erased in equal measure. Today, the weak happened to be human. The announcer's voice cracked across the airwaves like a whip, simultaneously translated into 24 languages, though it lost none of its smugness in the process. Ladies, gentlemen, ovipositors, and photophores, welcome to Judgment Day, a celebration of martial tradition and biological superiority. The crowd erupted. On the lower tiers, massive crustaceans slammed their claws in unison, sending ripples through the arena floor. On the upper tiers, gelatinous creatures quivered in delight, slapping pseudopods together like children clapping. Somewhere near the Imperial box, a throng of methane-breathing avians fanned their sulphurous feathers in a display of impatience. The Empire had promised spectacle, and they wanted their pound of flesh, preferably charred and still twitching. A single name flashed across the holographic betting boards that spiraled over the arena: Ellie Vera. Her odds of survival sat at an insulting 10,000 to 1. The spectators loved it. There was something delicious in watching fragile mammals fight hopeless battles. Humans were endearing in their stubbornness, like vermin learning to use fire, but their bones snapped easily, and their blood didn't even glow in the dark. Ellie walked onto the field, boots crunching over a thin layer of crushed obsidian. Her gait was casual, almost bored, as if she were on her way to buy cigarettes rather than participate in a gladiatorial execution. She wore matte black combat armor that hugged her wiry frame, a railgun slung across her shoulder like it was nothing more than a broom. The glowing sigil of Earth Command flickered on her chest plate, the light struggling to stay alive in the oppressive gravity field. The audience jeered. "She's tiny," growled a reptilian aristocrat in the front row, his golden scales reflecting the arena's sickly light. The Empire should have demanded a real challenger. A blob beside him rippled and emitted a wet gurgle. Laughter, presumably. Perhaps they wanted her to die quickly. How thoughtful. Ellie heard none of it. Or rather, she heard all of it and filed away in a calm, sterile corner of her mind where emotions went to die. She kept her eyes on the far end of the arena, where the gates to the Champions Tunnel were opening with a hiss of superheated air. And then he stepped out. Croft Thulax, the Empire's undefeated titan. His exoskeleton shimmered with the color-shifting iridescence of a collapsing star, each armor plate etched with the victories of 100 campaigns. Crotha's 6 insectoid legs dug furrows into floor as he advanced, his venomous mandibles clacking in anticipation. Energy spikes lined his thorax, humming with restrained plasma. The ground trembled with every movement. The crowd chanted his name, thousands of voices layered into a single, deafening roar. Croft, Croft, Croft. Ellie stood still, watching as the giant came to a halt across from her. The silence that followed was almost religious. Croft lowered his head in a traditional salute, spewing a stream of molten acid in a perfect circle counted as such. The liquid hissed as it scorched the obsidian floor. Ellie tilted her head slightly. "Nice trick," she said under her breath. "Hope you've got more where that came from." Her neural HUD flickered to life, calculations scrolling across her vision in neat green lines. Range, wind speed, structural weaknesses in Crotha's armor, predicted aggression vectors. All there. The railgun on her back hummed softly as it synced to her implants, waiting for the signal. Above them, the announcer's many mouths flared open. And now, humanity's challenger faces the pride of the Empire. Let this combat decide the worth of their species. Begin. The floor shuddered. A harsh whine filled the air as the arena's gravity spiked, pulling Ellie's body downward with force that could crush lesser combatants. Her boots held, but she felt her joints protest. Croft moved first. He lunged forward with terrifying speed for something his size, his clawed limbs slicing through the air. The ground cracked under his weight as he brought a limb crashing down where Ellie had been standing a moment ago. But Ellie wasn't there anymore. She'd rolled aside, smooth and deliberate, letting the claw smash into the obsidian and send shards flying. Her railgun came up in one practice motion, its power core glowing faintly like the eye of some ancient predator. The audience hissed and shrieked. From their perspective, the human's evasion wasn't skill. It was luck, a fluke prolonging the inevitable. Croft raised his head, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "Fragile mammal," he rumbled, his voice deep enough to shake dust from the rafters. "I will make this quick. Consider it mercy." Ellie wiped a fleck of obsidian dust from her cheek and let out a small, humorless laugh. "Don't," she murmured. "Mercy makes me itch." And in that moment, under the boiling lights of the Empire's grand arena, Ellie Vera took her first calm breath in 15 minutes. The last breath she'd allowed herself since she saw Thessa's execution broadcast on that cold transmission, since she made her vow to balance the scales and blood. The timer in her HUD ticked down silently. 15 minutes. That's how long the Empire celebrated. Her finger brushed the trigger of her railgun. Now it's my turn. The crowd, oblivious of their danger, roared louder. Ellie Vera had always found the calm before combat unsettling, not because she feared the fight, but because she despised waiting. Waiting was when thoughts crept in, coiling like parasites. Waiting was when memories bled through, unbidden and sharp. She could see Thessa's face even now. The woman's expression had been unreadable in her final moments, a mix of quiet defiance and something else. Resignation, maybe. The Empire's executioners hadn't granted her the dignity of last words. Instead, they had broadcast her death across 1,000 star systems, letting the galaxy watch as a human hero burned in sterile white light. Ellie hadn't flinched at the broadcast. She hadn't thrown a chair, punched a wall, or screamed to the heavens like some tragic figure in an operetta. She'd simply watched, lips pressed into a thin line, her sniper's hands resting still in her lap. And when the light faded and Thessa's body crumpled, she whispered one word. Enough. Now. Standing in the arena with Croft Thilox's shadow falling over her like a collapsing tower, she felt none of that old rage. The fury had been boiled down into something sharper, cleaner, like a scalpel. "Fragile mammal," Croft said again, his voice a basso growl that seemed to rattle the crowd's collective rib cages. "Why do you fight? You could have knelt, begged, been spared." Ellie tilted her head, the faintest curve tugging at her lips. "Spared?" she said, her voice carrying easily across the comm's amplifiers. "Oh, sweetheart, that's adorable. You really think I'm here to survive?" The crowd laughed, not with her, but at her. Even the announcers joined in, their voices overlapping in a chorus of contempt. 10,000 to 1 odds, one cried in gleeful tones. "The highest we've seen since the gelatinous duel cipher. 9. Bet now, citizens. Bet while there's still time." Ellie's neural HUD flickered, highlighting clusters of thermal signatures in the crowd. Aristocrats packed into private boxes, sipping fermented moonflowers. Soldiers on leave, itching for blood and spectacle. Merchants hawking glowing snacks shaped like Crotha's claws. All of them drunk on the lie of Empire invincibility. In the imperial box above, a rotund dignitary, some second cousin to the Emperor, leaned forward, lips curling into a sneer. "Pathetic," he said to the blob seated beside him. "Humans are charmingly stubborn, but this one will scream just like the rest. It's a pity they lack the grace to die quietly." The blob quivered in agreement, releasing a puff of sickly sweet gas. "Their bones are so brittle. I do hope she makes an amusing sound when she snaps." Ellie tuned them out. She didn't need to hear their words. She could read their intent in every curl of the lip, every ripple of a tentacle. Croft moved closer, his armored legs thudding against the obsidian floor. "I will crush you cleanly, mammal," he rumbled. "I don't enjoy dragging out such pitiful deaths." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "You must be great fun at parties." A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Sarcasm was a weapon they didn't recognize. Crotha's mandibles clicked irritably. "Mockery will not save you. Neither will underestimating me." Croft lunged, then stopped abruptly as the arena announcer's booming voice intervened. "Halt, combatants." The Empire's beloved pre-fight rituals had not yet concluded. The crowd groaned in disappointment as 6 floating drones ascended, projecting a holographic display of galactic banners, spinning sigils of conquered worlds, odes of loyalty spoken in languages that sounded like glass shattering underwater. Ellie sighed, resting her railgun casually against her shoulder. "Really?" she muttered. "We're doing the pre-slaughter pageantry now." The announcer ignored her. "By the sacred edict of the Empire, the combat shall proceed only once the ritual of valor has been completed." Around the arena, alien priests in segmented robes began their dance, waving electrified whips and chanting in harmonics that made Ellie's teeth vibrate. Croft joined them, lowering his head and scraping his claws in a traditional pattern that etched molten grooves into the ground. Ellie popped a nutrient tab into her mouth and chewed. The crowd gasped. "She's eating," screeched one announcer in disbelief. "In the sacred moment of pre-battle reverence." "Such disrespect," howled another. "No wonder their species is doomed." Ellie smirked, catching a glimpse of her reflection in the molten grooves Croft had carved. Her gray eyes looked tired, sure but not afraid. Never afraid. The HUD continued scrolling data, pinpointing vulnerabilities in Croft's armor. Slight warps in the energy plating where multiple combat strikes had overlapped, microfractures invisible to the naked eye. "Big," Ellie murmured to herself, scanning him head to foot. Loud. Predictable. Her neural implants chirped softly as the railgun synced to her targeting system. A faint vibration ran through the weapon as it adjusted to the arena's shifting gravity. "Do you even know why you're here?" Croft asked suddenly, his voice rumbling like thunder across the arena floor. Ellie's smirk vanished. "Do you?" she shot back. For a split second, Croft hesitated. He hadn't expected a reply that sharp. Ellie's finger brushed the trigger of her railgun, not to fire, not yet, but as a promise. The announcer's voice rose in a crescendo. "The ritual is complete. Let the battle commence. May the victor bring glory to their species, and shame to the vanquished." A hush fell over the crowd. Ellie's HUD blinked once. "Engage!" Croft roared, his massive body surging forward like an avalanche of armored chitin. The ground cracked under his weight. Ellie dropped into a crouch, railgun snapping up, her eyes calm and unblinking. 15 minutes, she thought, as the first tremor of his charge rattled her bones. That's how long the Empire celebrated after Thessa's death. I'll make sure they remember every second. The muzzle of her railgun glowed faintly as her neural implants whispered firing solutions in her ear. Crotha's shadow fell over her. Ellie exhaled once, slow and precise. Time to even the scales. And then the world erupted in noise and light. The instant Croft charged, the gravity field shifted again. A nauseating lurch pulled at Ellie's organs, as if the entire arena had decided up and down were merely polite suggestions. She rolled to her left just as one of Crotha's claws slammed into the floor where she'd been standing, the impact sending a shockwave that cracked the obsidian surface and threw up a spray of black shards. To the untrained eye, Ellie's dodge might have looked lucky. To Croft, it was probably irritating. But inside Ellie's neural HUD, it was nothing but numbers and angles, an endless cascade of data that ticked like a metronome in her mind. Vector, 26.3 degrees. Wind shear, negligible. Optimal distance, 47 meters. Time to strike, not yet. Crotha's mandibles clacked furiously as he wrenched his claw free and swung again, a wide, arcing blow meant to crush the fragile human into a red smear. Ellie ducked low, the blow missing her by inches as she slipped beneath his reach and fired a single shot into the energy shield surrounding his thorax. The shot pinged harmlessly against the barrier, dissipating in a burst of blue sparks. The crowd roared with laughter and approval, and even Croft let out a sound that might have been an amused growl. "Your weapon is worthless, mammal," Croft thundered, his voice resonating like a struck bell. "Surrender, and I may end this quickly." Ellie tapped a fingertip against her railgun stock as if considering. "Tempting," she said dryly, "but I've got this thing about mercy. Never trust an insect with good manners." A ripple of confusion and irritation passed through the audience. Mockery was not part of the Empire's combat lexicon. Crotha's dorsal energy spikes flared angrily, casting a sickly green glow across the arena. With a screech that split the air, he vaulted backwards, impossibly fast for his size, and landed on a spire of jagged rock that had risen from the arena floor. The gravity field shuddered again, shifting to favor his species' physiology. Ellie felt her limbs grow heavy. Sweat beaded along her hairline. Gravity increase, 1.4x standard. Human skeletal strain approaching threshold. Her railgun whispered to her through the neural link. Adjustments required. Precision reduced by 0.7%. Unacceptable, she thought back. Compensate. The railgun hummed faintly in acknowledgement. Above them, the announcer's voice cracked like lightning. Observe the might of Croft Dullox. Witness the futility of the human struggle. Will she run? Will she crawl? Or will she simply snap? Ellie's lips twitched. In her mind, a different voice spoke. Thessa's last words were silence. I won't give them that satisfaction. Croft leapt again, this time bringing his full weight down in a crushing stomp. The impact shattered more of the obsidian floor, sending molten cracks spiderwebbing toward Ellie's boots. She sprang backward, nearly colliding with a gravity well that had suddenly bloomed in the center of the arena. The Empire's little tricks. They always like to stack the odds before calling it honor. As Croft charged again, Ellie crouched low and extended her railgun forward, letting its muzzle glow faintly with gathering energy. He's fast. He's armored. But he's predictable. Through her HUD, she watched his movement patterns overlay into a web of possibilities. Every swing, every leap, every acidic roar added more data. Slowly, the chaotic mess became a map. He's used to winning on brute force. Let's teach him math. Her neural implants quickened, feeding her real-time calculations as Crotha's massive claw slashed across the arena in a blow meant to tear her in half. Ellie pivoted on her heel, letting the air displacement from the strike whip her braids sideways as she dodged. Then she fired, not at Croft, but at one of the arena's support beams. The shot punched through the beam center with surgical precision, sending a cascade of debris tumbling down. Croft stumbled as fragments of the beam bounced against his carapace, momentarily throwing off his balance. The crowd hissed in surprise. Desperation, one announcer crowed. The human resorts to environmental sabotage. How utterly pathetic. Ellie's railgun hummed again as she loaded another round. Not sabotage, she thought. Set up. Croft regained his footing and roared, a sound that vibrated deep in Ellie's ribcage. The massive insectoid lunged again, this time extending his forelimbs to pin her down. Trajectory, 14 degrees. Time to impact, 0.8 seconds. Ellie waited until his claws were nearly on her, until the stink of acid and scorched chitin filled her nose. Then she rolled to her right, jabbing the stock of her railgun into a fissure in the floor as she went. The fissure widened, releasing a jet of superheated gas that blasted into Crotha's face. The giant shrieked in pain and surprise, his energy shield flickering. Ellie came up on one knee, railgun braced against her shoulder. Shield instability detected. 3.2 seconds. That's my window. The audience fell silent. Even the announcers seemed to pause. Ellie exhaled slowly. Her neural HUD locked onto a tiny glowing beneath Crotha's left mandible, an exposed neural cluster. Good night, insect. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The railgun shot split the air with a piercing shriek. The slug struck home. Crotha's scream ended mid-roar. His massive body stiffened, energy spikes flaring wildly before collapsing inward. The alien titan toppled like a felled tree, the ground shaking with his final impact. For a moment, the arena was silent. Ellie lowered her weapon and straightened, rolling her shoulders as though she'd just finished a light workout. 10,000 to 1 odds, she murmured. You really should have bet on me. The quiet broke. A roar of shock and outrage cascaded from the audience. Aristocrats shrieked. Priests wailed. Even the imperial dignitary in the high box had gone pale, his plump fingers gripping the railing in horror. Above it all, the announcer's voice cracked into panic static. Ellie turned without fanfare and began walking toward the exit tunnel, her boots crunching over fractured obsidian. She didn't wave to the crowd, didn't look back. 15 minutes. She thought again as she reached the tunnel's shadows. That's how long you celebrated her death. I wonder how long you'll mourn your champion. The faint hum of her railgun was the only sound that followed her into the darkness. The panic began as a murmur, small, almost polite. It spread like a contagion to the upper tiers of the Colosseum, where golden-skinned dignitaries and translucent-eyed ministers watched Croft Deluxe's still body twitch one final time before collapsing into silence. His energy spikes flickered, then dimmed, leaving nothing but a soft crackle of cooling chitin and a void where the Empire's pride had once stood. The betting boards froze. 10,000 to 1 odds dissolved into static as the holographic glyph scrambled, unable to process a reality in which a human had triumphed. For a moment, it was as if the entire Empire had forgotten how to breathe, and then the screaming began. "Impossible!" barked a feathered senator in the Imperial box, his crest feathers flaring bright orange in alarm. "This is sabotage! The human cheated." "Cheating?" A gelatinous financier gurgled in outrage. "I bet on her failure. I demand my credits back." "Shut your gills, Zypher. There are larger implications than your damnable wager." In the rows below, panic rippled through the soldiers and aristocrats as they realized what had just happened. A lone human sniper, underestimated and mocked, had brought down their undefeated champion in front of the galaxy. Ellie Vera didn't hear any of it. Her boots echoed softly in the stone tunnel as she walked away from the arena. No one dared stop her. Not the priest still frozen mid-chant, not the guards whose rifles now seemed like laughable toys in her presence. She keyed her comm link and spoke in a voice so calm it seemed almost tender. "Target neutralized. Standing by for extraction." There was a faint crackle, and then a woman's voice replied, low and taut with suppressed emotion. "Ellie, they're losing their minds up here. The whole fleet's in chaos." "Good. Let them stew in it a little longer." From the shadows above, an Imperial drone scuttled along the ceiling, its lenses dilating wildly as it recorded. Ellie didn't look up. Instead, she spoke again, her words meant for every comm channel she knew they'd be listening on. "You killed one of ours," she said softly. "So I took your champion. Seems fair to me." The drone's feed blinked red as it sent her message out across a dozen star systems. In the Empire's high council chambers, alarms wailed. Ministers shouted over each other in a dozen tongues, their faces pale as data feeds projected images of Krotha's corpse into the air. She wasn't even supposed to reach the arena alive, a skeletal bureaucrat screeched, his voice climbing into a register only canine species could properly hear. "Shut down the broadcast," another roared. "We can't let the colonies see this." "It's too late," said a monotone voice from the shadows. A tall, black-robed advisor stepped forward, his eyes twin slits of white fire. "The damage is done. The myth of Imperial supremacy has been cracked." "Then kill her. Kill the sniper before she leaves the system." The advisor's expression didn't change. "And if she survives again, what then?" On the floor, a young aide whispered what none of them wanted to say aloud. "She just became a symbol." Back in the tunnel, Ellie kept walking. She could feel it, the weight of countless alien eyes on her, watching as her silhouette receded into the dark. Some would call her a killer. Some would call her a hero. She didn't care for either title. She paused at the threshold where the light of the arena gave way to the shadows of the hangar. A tall, spindly alien in ceremonial robes stood waiting there, holding a glowing data slate in shaking hands. Its luminous eyes flicked nervously over her railgun. "General Vera," it said, voice tight. "On behalf of the Empire, I am authorized to offer." Ellie didn't stop walking. "Tell your masters," she said without looking at it. This was restraint. The being stiffened, horror flickering across its luminous features. "Restraint?" it echoed. Ellie's boots clicked softly as she stepped into her ship. The hatch sealed behind her with a hiss. Inside, she found herself staring at a small photo taped to the console, a photo of Thessa, smiling in a rare moment of peace. Ellie touched it with 2 fingers, then sat back in the pilot's chair as the engines hummed to life. 15 minutes, she thought again. That's all the Empire had allowed themselves to celebrate. Now let's see how long they grieve. The ship's engines roared as she lifted off, leaving behind the screams, the outrage, and the myth of Imperial invincibility crumbling in her wake. In the arena, Krotha's corpse still lay where it had fallen, steam rising from the shattered neural cluster Ellie's shot had destroyed. And far above, in the cold reaches of space, a dozen Imperial fleets scrambled like ants whose nest had been kicked apart. They had thought humanity was fragile. They had forgotten that even fragile things can be sharp enough to cut.